later. Okay, Josh, I like to ask guests kind of who their top five, favorite five is for Canada basketball. But I guess in your role, in your job, like who for five, who do you love interviewing, covering, just dealing with, talking with, getting sound bites from, man?
It's interesting, like covering Canada basketball in the sense that like media isn't a required part of the gig in the same way that it is for players in the NBA, where it's literally in the contract, and obviously you're getting paid a lot of money in the NBA. The league really, really enforces it for obvious reasons. And when you're volunteering essentially to play for your country over the summer, it doesn't quite have the same level of obligation. And obviously, like Canada basketball, not to the same point that it used to, but like the program is just so grateful, I think, that as they should be, that the NBA players are showing up and participating, that there isn't a lot of pushback there.
Right.
It still happens to some degree. So it really tests the players, I think, to see like, okay, well, how much do you want to do media? And you find out, I think, a lot about the players and the people in that situation when it's not required. And what I like to see is like after a loss, after a really, really bad loss, and Canada has had a number of them over the years, after an elimination game, who is there? Who shows up? Who is willing to talk to the media, take accountability when they don't have to? So I was in Mexico City in 2015. Of course, that did not go well. And that was a talented team led by Andrew Wiggins. Two players spoke after that really brutal loss to Venezuela. Corey Joseph, Kelly Olynyk, and like they're 100% of my top five.
Nice.
Corey isn't like the best quote, but he's one of the best people, not just professional athletes or basketball players, one of my favorite people that I've ever worked around. Just like a stand-up class act, always so generous with his time. Like I said, was really helpful with the RJ stuff, and just over the years, whether he was playing for the Raptors or not, Kelly's been great since getting to the Raptors. I'll put RJ in there too, just because like I think he's so polished, and that comes from Rowan's influence, sometimes maybe to a fault, because he's trained enough and smart enough to know when not to say things too. So that can be frustrating sometimes, but no, he's really personable and really like respectful too. I think really thoughtful in his responses. From a Raptors standpoint, I really appreciated, I think it was 2 weeks ago, the game against Milwaukee, a really bad loss, the first time that they were healthy. He was the guy that said, as honest and as direct as I've heard anyone this year say, like, this is unacceptable. So those three guys come to mind. I'm working backwards here, but the guy at the absolute top of my list, because I mentioned guys that are like pretty good quotes, the guy who is like A+ quote, A+ insight, generous with his time, despite the fact that he doesn't have to be right now because he is at the absolute top of the sport, an MVP caliber player. And soon we can eliminate the word caliber player and just say an MVP is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who is like such a unicorn in terms of a superstar in basketball, because a lot of the time you associate like that level of play with like the ego and being a bit of a prima donna, tough to deal with. Not the case at all with Shai. Like super humble, super down to earth, really thoughtful with his answers and his insight. And again, I wasn't in Paris for the Olympics. Unfortunately, not a lot of us Canadians reporters were, but my understanding is that he was one of those guys after the loss to France to really stand up and take accountability. And that's not surprising to me at all. And then I guess I need a fifth guy, and I'll stay in the family because I guess it's in the blood, is Nikhil is really great as well. And I would say, like, unlike Shai, who has, I mean, obviously he kind of started a little bit at the bottom as well with the Clippers and has worked his way up to the caliber player that he is right now. But I think Nikhil has such a unique perspective just based on like bouncing around as much as he has and being in so many different positions and essentially playing for his life in the NBA, playing for his future. Like, he just has a really interesting perspective on the game that he's so generous with, like, sharing with us. So I've really enjoyed speaking to him.